Hey, all, Tom Moran here from Tom's Big Spiders. Well, I used to do these a lot more many years ago. A lot of times I would rehouse some spiders and then later on just do an update video on whether or not they had burrowed, how they had made out in their new enclosures, and I just stopped doing them. And I've had a lot of people ask me, hey, are you ever going to do updates on species X? So recently I've done a lot of rehousings in which I've taken spiders and given them a lot more room to potentially burrow. Now, in some cases, I'm 100% positive they're going to appreciate, they're going to do some burrowing, and they're going to be much calmer spiders as a result. In other cases, it was one of those deals where I'm like, all right, let's just see what happens. So today we're going to look at some of my most recently rehoused spiders. We're going to see how did they make out in the new enclosures? Did they use the burrow space that I gave them? Did they hide where I thought they would hide? Did they want to burrow at all? Or did they fill in their burrows? So we're going to take a look at several of them and see what's going on with them. Just kind of a way to update folks because, again, I think it's one thing to set them up in enclosures and talk about what we think is going to happen. It's another thing entirely to be able to go back a few months later and look at it and go, this is what they did. So enough talking. Let's take a look at some of the spiders I recently rehoused and see how they're making out. All right, and here is my T. albopilosus that we rehoused on October 19th of last year. Before that, she was in kind of a shallow enclosure. I wanted to give her some more room to see if she wanted to burrow because before her last molt, she tried to basically dig out underneath the cork bark. And there she is. There's beautiful legs right in there. Oh, she's going to come out and see us. Before her last molt, she tried to basically build a burrow for herself. And she dug up a bunch of dirt, used a bunch of webbing, kind of used the webbing and dirt to kind of create an awning for her burrow. Hey, where are you going, girl? And then basically molted in there, came out, and then the burrow kind of collapsed. So the idea was to get her into something that would allow her some room to dig, and dig she did. As you can see, she just came out of her burrow. Now, did she do a ton of digging? No, but she definitely cleared that thing out. If we back up here, you can see all the dirt that's been stacked up here. She's filled the water dish a couple times. I'm going to try to get some good footage of her because she's right out in the open. Gorgeous little spider. Whoop. Now, obviously, T. albos have a reputation for being super tractable, very calm spiders. This girl here went through a stage when I first got her. She was a young adult, and she was very laid back. A spider that if I was one that would handle, I definitely would have handled her without an issue. However, since she's molted a few times, she has kind of picked up a little bit of wildness. She's not quite as laid back as you can see there. She's not responding very well to having the light in her face, and I don't honestly blame her. So now what she'll do is she'll retreat to her burrow. Before, what she would do is kind of try to hide under her cork bark. There wasn't really a lot of room for her to dig, so there wasn't really great coverage for her, but she wasn't one that would sit out in the open and let you, handle her. I have not received any threat poses from her. She does not kick hairs very often at all. I don't think I can ever remember her kicking hairs, but just a little skittish. So now she's got the room to burrow. I'm kind of glad we got to see her a bit because I got a funny feeling a lot of the spiders on this video we are not going to see because they're entrenched away in their burrows, but she definitely used the burrow room. Now, there's a theory out there. Unfortunately, there are still wild-caught T. albos coming into the hobby. And this is a fact because I've spoken to many people who have bought T. albo females at pet stores and then contacted me to tell me not only did they have an egg sac, but it was a viable sac. They actually got babies. So that means that it's a female that was plucked from the wild, sold in the pet trade, one that should be repopulating her native area with babies instead of having them be in a hobbyist collection that really wasn't looking for babies. So they are still being imported, sadly, which is pretty pathetic, honestly. And I do have a theory that it seems like some people report ones that burrow, some people report ones that don't. I found that any specimen that I've kept, especially a Faunopelma, Grammostola brachypelma, that I worry might be a wild-caught specimen, tends to want to burrow. They're still exercising those natural instincts to burrow. And then I found that folks that get ones that are captive bred slings, they are less inclined to. At least that's what it seems, having talked to people. And this is with Calcotas, a Faunopelma simani, for example. I've had a lot of folks with simanis like, hey, mine burrows. Where'd you get it from? A pet store as a young adult? Yeah, that was probably, sadly, a wild-caught specimen where you ask somebody else, mine never burrows. Where'd you get it? It was a wild or a captive bred sling. That seems to be the thing here. So I do worry that this one, when I got her, she was a young adult female. I am worried that this was wild-caught, but I did get her many years ago before I realized that was a huge deal. Would not do that again. So T. albopilosus definitely appreciating some room to burrow and do her thing. And here we have my Brachypelma smithi. This one was rehoused November 2nd, 2024. At that time, I had her in a small kind of Tupperware-ish type container that really didn't give her a lot of room to burrow. And as I had mentioned, these guys, I have two of them, were some of my most skittish spiders I have kept. We're talking about bolting. We're talking about hair kicking. So I thought that putting her into something with a bit more space and perhaps some room to burrow would help. As you can see, we have a cork bark hide. I gave her a starter burrow inside there, and she did not use it. So there were kind of some bets. Every time I do one of these, we all kind of bet and have a little joke about the fact whether or not they'll actually use it. A lot of folks are like, they won't. She'll sit up. She won't. She'll sit right up on top. And she did. She sat right up on top. But that's fine because, as you've noted, she's calmed down quite a bit. Now, again, I'm not sure if that is actually because she is comfortable in the new surroundings, like the new surroundings actually made the difference, or if it's just because after her last molt, she matured a bit. Again, sometimes some of these beginner species, Brachypelma, Aphonopelma, Grammostola, go through a period where they are very, very skittish. And that doesn't get mentioned a lot. So people hear that they are great beginner species. They hear that they are tractable. You can handle them. And then they pick up a sling or usually a juvenile and the thing's crazy. And they're like, uh-oh, what did I get myself into? But I've heard from a lot of folks that have raised the bee smithi that they usually outgrow that behavior. Although I have spoken to some folks that they have ones that will still kick some hair. This one has calmed down. You can see that booty is completely covered in hair. She hasn't been kicking a lot at all. As a matter of fact, I can't even imagine getting footage like this of her before when she was in that other enclosure before that last molt, because she would have been bolting all around, kicking hairs. It would have been a nightmare. But gorgeous spider. Whoop, as I accidentally dropped the top. And unfortunately, that's what we kind of call it's a defensive pose, but we call it the stress pose because they're pulling their knees up over their carapace and over their eyes, kind of protecting themselves. So we're going to let her get back to doing what she's doing. But as you can see, she's got a lot more floor space, regardless if she wants to be fossorial or not. There's terrestrial-wise, there's a lot more room for her to go around and do her thing. She's calm. She's not acting out or being defensive. So regardless of whether or not she used the burrowing room, this seemed to be a good move for her. All right, and here we have my Brachypelma emilia that we rehoused in November of 2024, I believe November 9th. At that time, if I'm not mistaken, she was in one of the 8x8x8 Exoterra nanos, and she had a burrow that she was starting to kind of abandon. She just seemed a little too big for the enclosure. And that's what happens sometimes. They get too big for their burrows and they kind of go out and about, because I think in nature, they'd probably find another burrow. But in this case, we put her into one of the tarantula cribs enclosures, really nice acrylic enclosure, and I gave her plenty of room to do some burrowing this time because she had burrowed her entire life. And, well, nothing. You can see she's sitting right out in the open. We're going to try to get some close-ups of her because she is a beautiful spider. Gorgeous, gorgeous girl. Very picturesque against that green moss in there. Just amazing spiders. So if we look over here, right where she's on that cork bark, right in there was where the burrow was. And I kind of dug out a little starter burrow for her. I figured if she wanted to go in there and start, burrowing from that point on, she could. She did not. She dragged some of the moss in. I thought she was going to do some burrowing at one point. And as you can see, it's not completely filled in, but she's not using it as a burrow. She's kind of sitting right out in the open, which is fine because this is a gorgeous spider, don't get me wrong. And I love seeing her. And she seems to have calmed down a little bit. She was much, much, much more skittish before, which is why I think she was very shy. Anytime I would open up her enclosure, she would immediately retreat to her burrow. However, she seems to be a bit more bold and laid back now, which sometimes just happens as they age and mature. I've been explaining to people for a while that a lot of the species that we define as tractable, a lot of the quote-unquote beginner species, will go through stages when they are slings and juveniles where they are very skittish, shy. Some will kick hairs, they will bolt, and then once they put on a little bit of size, they tend to mellow out a bit. And that seems to be the case here, because I will tell you before, it took forever for me to get good shots of her when she was in the other enclosure, because she would either bolt and hide or run around the enclosure, and now she's just sitting right out in the open. So this is a new one, and I'm really enjoying it. So Brachypelma emilia, gorgeous spider, not using the extra space, but the enclosure still looks nice. I do got to drag over the water dish. The water dish used to be over in this corner here. She has moved it, so we're going to clean that up and fill it up after I end up recording here. All right, here's my Nandu coloratovillosus. I rehoused this one in January of this year, I believe January 11th. And at that time, she had outgrown her original enclosure, and she had burrowed her entire life. And after her last molt, she had actually filled in her burrow. So I was hoping to give her some more room to burrow in here. Unfortunately, she did not use it. Now, as we see here, as we get a little closer, gorgeous little spider. Love the way they look, almost like an N. trapepii, with a Vitalis chromatus, or what used to be Nandu chromatus. Look at those red hairs on the abdomen. Luckily, this one's out and about because some of these obviously we're not going to see the spiders because they burrowed. But anyway, there was the starter burrow I gave her right in there. And as you can see, she completely filled it in. Now, I've had ones that later on will come back and open up that burrow and use it. It's happened a few times over the years. But a lot of times once they close them up, that's it. They're kind of terrestrial. We'll see how it goes. But very, very cool spider. And again, I'm glad she's actually being kind of well behaved here because since she hasn't been burrowed, she has been very, very skittish. And again, that's the whole reason why we give them the extra room to do what they need to do, because I would rather have a spider I don't see quite as much that is comfortable than a spider that's out all the time and is crazy because, quite frankly, it's being defensive. It feels exposed. Gorgeous girl there. So obviously, if there are any changes to this, I will update folks. She is in one of the M design enclosures that I love for my juveniles. She'll probably outgrow this in a couple molts or so, but right now it's a good size enclosure for her. And again, we did give her enough room. If you look at the side here, there are quite a few inches of substrate for her to burrow into, and I kept the bottom levels moist. As it dries out a little bit, we'll see what happens. I do like to keep part of it moist from, although I feel like this is a very hardy species that with a water dish will do just fine. So Nandu coloratovillosus, I always struggle with those L's and R's. Doing great, but no burrowing. So on January 18th of this year, it was time to rehouse my Vitalis paranaensis, who had been in the same enclosure for quite some time. It was one of those M design enclosures, which was, it offered her a decent amount of space, but she had just molted. She was trying to burrow, and it didn't seem like there was enough room for her to burrow. So I really wanted to get her into something that would allow for that burrowing behavior. So here we put her into one of the acrylic Authentic Joy enclosures, which I picked up specifically for smaller arboreals. And as you can see, if we go close, there is the den. I don't think you can see, oh, you can see her legs in there. There they are. Probably not going to see the whole spider, but she definitely has been burrowing. She immediately, the night of the rehousing, went in here, did a bunch of burrowing. She dug all night long. I came in the next day. She was digging. As you can see, there's mounds of dirt everywhere. Mounds of dirt up here where she stacked it all up. The water dish has been pulled into her burrowing a couple times now. And if we turn this around, what we will see is she has dug out the entire back of this area. I'm going to put the flash on. There we go. All of this has been dug out, and it actually, she's starting to loop around. So it's digging. She's digging back there as well. So she has opened up quite a burrow. Now, this is one of the ones, if this starts to cave in up top, every once in a while they dig too much and structurally it doesn't work. So there's too many openings. What I can do, and I've done this before, is I will go back through after they've settled in. I usually contain the spider, and then it will add some more dirt to fill in these holes here to give more security. And usually they appreciate that. What ends up happening is I pack down some dirt in there. She'll come back. She'll clean up around here, but get rid of this little spot up here where it's an opening, another opening to the burrow. I don't think that was necessarily meant, because usually with species like this, they have one entrance to the burrow. So I'll play it by ear, see what happens. Sometimes I don't do it. I know in the instance of my Theraphosa blondie, both of them ended up digging down in and then accidentally caved up the spot up here. So what I did was later on, once they were, I contained the spider, went back and filled that area in a little bit, and neither of them dug back up there again. I think that was an accident. So we'll play it by ear. But definitely, if you look here, a lot of digging all the way down. She seemed to appreciate the moist substrate too, so we're going to keep that on the moist side, keep the water dish in there. But this was definitely a move that I would have been shocked if she didn't dig, and she did immediately, so that's good. She's much more comfortable now. As I had mentioned before, this was one of my flightiest spiders by far over the years, but now she just, I will come out up into the transfer room. She'll be sitting right out in the open, or when I started doing this video, she was up in here, and then if I disturb her, she'll go down to burrow. So I'm still seeing her quite a bit, but she's getting to feel more comfortable in her surroundings. So V. paranaensis, definitely using that extra room, definitely doing some burrowing. So just a couple of weeks ago, we rehoused my Pamphobeteus langenbucheri into this tarantula cribs enclosure. And as I was doing the rehousing, I was talking about the fact that what I was hoping would happen is she would set up shop either in the cork bark in here or behind or around the cork bark. Well, as you can see, as we turn this around, that's exactly what she did. Now, this is not one I expect to see a spider in because she is hiding. She is quite comfortable in there. I will say when I come out in the morning, I often catch her sitting right out in the open, which is great. And that's ideally what you want, I think. I've heard some people say, well, what is the point of keeping a spider that you're not going to see? Even some of the, the fossorial species, some of the more shy arboreals, before you come up and disturb them, even by kicking the lights on or moving around, they will usually be out the open, or at least at the entrance of their burrows. In the case of a fossorial, they're waiting for food. In the case of an arboreal, they may just be exercising their arboreal tendencies or also waiting for food. But usually you see them out and about. So I think that's kind of the wrong way of looking at it. Like, if you're going to keep these animals, the idea is to give them the space to do what they need to do so they're more comfortable. That's always what this is about. So as you can see, I'll go ahead and take the back panel off here. There you can see the cork bark, and I strategically broke a piece off to leave a little area in there so she could go down. But what they do is they drag up the dirt. You can see all that dirt's been disturbed there, dragged up some of that sphagnum moss, New Zealand sphagnum moss I built in there, I put in there, and then they built like a little tunnel. And usually what will happen, at least with my Psalmopia species, is they'll start webbing, and that web will start coming out from around here and kind of come out into the surrounding substrate, and that will be where they hunt from. So far, so good. The other spot I was thinking that she may end up using as her burrow is right behind the plant. I've had them do that before, where they set up right in here. They bring up some of this moss and they build a little area around it. But nope, right in there. That's exactly what we want. So she's comfortable. Again, I do catch her out every once in a while, but it's about comfort for the spider. That's what we're looking for. And I have just talked about Psalmopia species, and it seems like people are 50-50 about either having kind of ones that are right out in the open and visible, or ones that like to bolt and hide. I guess mine fall in the middle because I catch them out enough to enjoy them, but I feel like they're comfortable enough that they can go to their dens if need be. So this is my most current rehousing. This is my Pamphobeteus species Duran. This is one I've had for quite some time. If you check out the last video, it was actually one of the first, if not the first, husbandry video I ever attempted on YouTube, and it was a train wreck, quite frankly. But anyway, older girl, she was in one of these Sterilite shoeboxes, one of those bad boys over there for quite some time. And for a bit, she was able to still continue to burrow. She seemed to appreciate having a place to hide. However, after her last molt that ended, she was not able to construct an adequate burrow. It kind of collapsed, and she was sitting on top. She started webbing over it, which is fine. She was acting much more calm than she had in the past, but I kind of realized she'd probably like that opportunity to burrow again. So we ended up putting her into one of these large tarantula cribs enclosures. And I wanted to put her into something bigger, give her more room to burrow, and I wanted to put her into something nicer because this is a spider I've had for quite some time. She's a beautiful spider, and I wanted to make sure I could display her properly. So if we look in here, you will see right in there, there is a burrow I'm trying to get. There we go. She at first kind of went around, explored the enclosure, and then later that night I came up, she was actually digging some dirt out of there. You can see here where she has placed all the dirt. It actually went into the water dish a couple times. A lot of times they put dirt in the water dish. The theory behind it is that in the wild, if there is running water or a pool of water, that's a good place to get rid of their refuse. So whether it be the boluses, whether it be stuff that they want out of their burrows, they drop it in water, and then maybe it rains, a stream comes, it disappears. So that's why everybody thinks they use their water dishes as basically garbage bins. I mean, it's one of those things, if you give your tarantulas a water dish, they're probably at some point, or many of them at some point, are going to fill them with something you don't want in the water dish. But that, I always find it easier to just clean up. You puck the water dish out, you dump it out, clean it, stick it right back in, you're good to go. But we'll walk around the side here. I don't know if you can see it. Slide this out of the way. You can see where she's gone all the way down. Actually, there are her feet right in there. There she is, all the way down the corner. She has opened up a nice big burrow for herself. So this is a situation where the spider absolutely appreciated the extra room. She is much more comfortable. I feel bad now because I'm thinking of the years that she was pretty high-strung. I mean, she was never a terrible spider to deal with by any stretch of the imagination, but she was definitely a bit high-strung. I'm realizing now that that all could have been alleviated for her a while ago if I had just given her something that would allow more room for burrowing. So some of my Pamphobeteus, actually right now, as far as my Pamphobeteus species, my Arañapolito has a burrow. My Antinous created a burrow. We rehoused her, and I think almost the same, or yeah, the identical enclosure to this one. She has a burrow as well. And so we will continue. I have a Pamphobeteus species mascara. We'll see what happens with that one. Right now, it's one of the only Pamphos I've had that as a juvenile is not burrowing at all. She has space to, she hasn't. So we'll see where that goes. But anyway, Pamphobeteus species Duran, for those who have been asking, did she end up burrowing? Yes, she absolutely did. So again, at the end of the day, don't be a substrate Scrooge. This is something I was guilty of in the past. I would read terrestrial and immediately just give the spider a couple inches of substrate. And looking back on it, I have many spiders that were a little bit, we'll say, defensive, and probably because I didn't give them room to do what they needed to do, which is construct burrows that allowed them to feel safe and secure. As you can see with the ones we showed today, some of them were out, some of them weren't. The ones that were out that didn't have burrows seemed to be okay with that. The ones that did have burrows would run to them. And that's the option you want to give your spider. That's how you keep from having overly defensive animals for the most part. You give them that space. You give them the opportunity. If it's an arboreal species, I've heard folks say, yeah, I don't like to give them corkbark rounds because you'll never see them. However, corkbark rounds, and this is something that I started using more recently. In the past, I did give them flats because I was hoping I'd see them more. It allows them a spot that they can start off in and feel perfectly comfortable. Sometimes they'll dig in the bottom. As you can see with our Pamphobeteus species, she brought some dirt up from the bottom. She built around it with some dirt, and eventually she'll start webbing out. You want the spider to be secure. And I found that, like I said a couple times in the video, when I come up here, when I get home from work, even with the lights on, a lot of these guys are right out in the open and don't disappear until I either try to jostle their cage because I'm trying to get some pictures for Instagram, or if I take them down for a feeding, then they'll bolt. I see them quite a bit. The idea is, A, don't worry about using up the substrate. I mix my own right now. I've stopped using the premium stuff because, quite frankly, I can mix something that's just as good for a fraction of the cost. So lately it's been 40% peat, 40% cocoa fiber. I buy the huge bricks, some of them like 10 to 11 pound bricks off Amazon. Usually I can get them for like 14 bucks. The peat, I can get huge bags of it for 10, 15 bucks. Mix it up with a little vermiculite in there, and it works great for me. It's cheap, and that way I don't have to worry about feeling like I'm wasting money by putting extra substrate in. If they use the dirt, great. If they don't use the dirt, I don't care. I'm not wasting, what is it, a couple cents in dirt? It shouldn't matter. But the trick is to make sure you give them that opportunity. If they use it, fantastic. If they don't, no harm, no foul. All right, so that will do it for this one. As always, if you liked it enough to subscribe, very much appreciate. Click the little circle up in there. I'm going to put some more videos over in here. You take the time to comment. I'll take the time to respond. Just know it can take me a few days, usually about a week, because I get busy and I get a bunch of comments. Guys, stay safe. Catch you all next time.